What's up, Tim? Welcome to the Dad Edge, my friend.
Thanks, Larry. It's great to be with you.
It's good to have you here, man. Hey, listen, you want to start out with some fun questions?
Absolutely. Let's
All
do it.
right. So I'll give you a choice, okay? Because I'm going to put you on the spot,
Okay.
and just either one of these that might require more thought or whatever. But okay, so question number one, either or. Question number one is share with me with me and the audience. What was your favorite thing to do as a kid? So like whether it be your pastime with sports, whether it
Yeah.
be like
Yeah.
how you played or whatever else, like just say favorite pastime as a kid. That's question number one. Question
Okay.
number two is what was one of the most embarrassing or funny things that happened to you growing up?
Oh my. Okay. All right. So the first question, I was a baseball nut.
All right.
Um, so I grew up in my early years in Cincinnati, and I remember you mentioned you were in St. Louis, so the Cardinals or the Reds would duke it out, back in the day. Just love baseball. So I played Little League baseball and went on through high school, but then stopped at college, but just loved it. Still have memorized the Cincinnati Reds batting lineup, RBIs, homers, all that stuff from the 70s. That's how old I am. So that was the Big Red Machine. Have you heard of the Big Red Machine, Larry?
I have heard of the Big Red Machine, but
Okay.
I don't remember exactly what it is.
Yeah, well, that was the Reds, the Cincinnati Reds lineup back in the 70s when they went to 3 or 4 World Series and won two of them, and it was just fun times. So baseball was my pastime. Yeah. And the second question,
Oh, we're
so
getting
does
both.
college does co yeah, I'm going to do both. Does college count as growing up?
Of course it does. I mean, that's when
Okay,
all
all
the
right.
shenanigans like really happen,
So,
right? You're
so this
you're
is
old enough to know better, but you're still doing really childish things.
exactly what it was. So I'm ashamed of this, but I'm going to say it on the air here. Freshman year of college, I was trying to mind my P's and Q's and make good grades and keep the scholarship and all that stuff. So I was trying to just stay in boundaries. But there was now remember, this is the 70s. There was a group that formed called the BRA, the BRA. It was the
The
Bear
bra.
Runners of
Okay.
America. Yes. These guys stripped down except for a belt, and then they wore underwear on their head, peering through the leg holes. I'm not kidding. And they would streak. You remember streaking was big in the 70s. They would streak through some other dorm or some other floor on our residence hall, and they would open the door, flick on the lights off and on, and scare whoever was trying to sleep at 2 a.m. there. So I heard about this, but I was certainly not going to participate in this kind of a thing until spring semester freshman year. They go, you got to join us. You got to be a part of this. I go, I'm not going to do that. Well, they talked me into it. So I get in uniform and we're all lined up in front of the doors of these dorm rooms. And Tom, the leader of the BRA, yells out, "Brah!" And we all flipped open the door of whatever door we're in front of and flick on the lights. We scare the people inside and we dance a little jig and then we run. We run, that is, supposedly to the stairwell where we can get back down to our floor unnoticed. I went to the elevator.
No, you did not.
So there I was in my birthday suit waiting at the elevator.
Did you? Okay, just out of curiosity, did you get in that elevator and then the doors closed and you're like, oh crap, this is a bad idea?
Uh-huh. It's exactly when it hit me.
What happened next?
Yeah, well, I walked out. Now, this is a men's dorm. So I walked out and there was some guys, they go, "What are you doing?" So I'm on my way to the restroom. So,
Oh
but
my
then they knew
gosh,
I was a part
man.
of the BRA. So I wasn't able to escape my attachment to that horrible streaking unit that I now don't know why I just shared on your podcast.
Oh, dude. Hey, you know what's so funny is that you're like the real oh my gosh. I'm totally blanking on his name. The guy from Talladega Nights, like
Oh,
for crying
yeah.
out loud.
Ricky Bobby.
Ricky, right, but his real name. Oh my gosh, like
Oh,
it's totally
Will
escaping me.
Ferrell. Will
Will
Ferrell.
Ferrell. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we're going streaking,
That's right. Yeah, I
right?
was Will Ferrell that night, and
Okay.
yes, I'm not sharing that story ever again.
Well, I mean, was KFC still open? Did you guys head there afterwards?
Fully clothed. Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my
My God.
gosh, man, that's so cool. Hey, well, let's I want to start actually with your childhood. This is a dad's
Okay.
show, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one thing I've noticed is that, different guests have really different experiences as it relates to their childhood, both good and
Yeah.
not so good, right? But as far as
Yeah.
like how you grew up, siblings, mom and dad, and like what was the family unit look like?
Yeah. I had two really good parents, and they were really good because they were so different. They balanced each other out. So my mom was so fun loving. She made growing up fun. She was kind of like Mary Poppins. In every job that must be done, there's an element of fun. You find the fun and snap, the job's a game. That was my mom. My dad was an engineer,
Brilliant.
so he was very methodical and not super emotionally available. I don't think I remember hugging him until I was in college and I went away to school. But I knew he provided for me and loved me. It was just in a very calculated way. So mom was very let's have fun, as
Yeah,
we were, and dad was very but I gleaned from both. My older sister thought dad was not a good dad. I felt like I got just what I needed, in terms of intellect and emotion from the combination of the two. And I would just say to listeners, obviously you want to glean whatever you can. Mom and dad, of course, were not perfect. They were
sure.
human, just like you are. But I was able to pull, I feel like, the good from each and then find in other men what dad wasn't able to give me. So John Maxwell's been in my life since 83, Sean Mitchell, others like that. And I just absolutely felt so fortunate to have the input I got. I always tell people if I don't do a good job now, it's my own fault because I
It's your
had
own
great input
fault.
growing up. Yeah.
That is so cool, man. Very, very cool. What's so cool about the experience with your mom is
Yeah.
that, getting kids to do things is sometimes really, really hard, right? And we lose our patience as parents because we're just like, just do the thing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But if you
Yeah.
can make it into a game, I mean, I've noticed that too. And sometimes I'm like, why don't I leverage that strategy just way more
Yes.
often?
Yes.
Because like
Yes.
even getting ready for bed, I'm like, I bet you guys can't
Yep.
get ready for bed in under 3 minutes, right?
Yeah. That's all
Versus
right.
like,
Yeah.
go get ready for bed,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Like,
so
so
true. It's so true. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and I have noticed at bedtime, kids are usually a little bit more vulnerable. Like when you're tucking them in, if you are indeed tucking them in, they're more open to open up. And so I'll share things, or I used to, when my kids were younger, ask questions like, did anybody hurt your feelings today? Did you hurt anybody else's feelings today? You feel like you need to make it right, blah, blah, blah. And I would have never in the run and gun of the daytime activities been able to talk like that. So I tried to take advantage of that. And I'll tell you what my mom did, Larry, that was really good. I did a parenting book some years ago called 12 Huge Mistakes Parents Can Avoid. And the three big umbrellas that I think moms and dads kind of get wrong accidentally today are this: we risk too little, we rescue too quickly, and we rave too easily.
mhm,
My mom did not do those. She let me take risks. I mean, I stayed out, skinned my knee, whatever, that sort of thing. And I feel like I was matured in her allowing me to skin my knee, and rather than being overprotective. Rescue too quickly. If I ever dared to call home and say I forgot my permission slip, mom would say, "Well, you better navigate that with your teacher because I'm not coming down." you know. And I think far too often we're running down and we're not really helping our kids mature
yeah.
by removing the consequences of those decisions. So anyway, all that to say, I feel like my mom somehow she was sensible. And I think we need to return to sensible leadership in our homes for our children. Yeah.
Can you repeat those? So I'm taking notes as you're talking here. Rescue too quickly was one. What were the other two?
Yeah. We risk too little. We're so afraid of their safety. We rescue too quickly. We're so afraid of their status. What if they don't get a good grade? And then we rave too easily. And I am for encouraging kids. Oh my gosh, I love encouraging kids. But sometimes I think we overuse the word awesome. We tell them they're awesome for putting the fork in the dishwasher. Well, their boss ain't gonna tell them they're awesome for showing up on time at work. So
Right.
I was by the time they were in middle school, I was very calculated with my affirmation. I would say thank you for putting the fork in the dishwasher, but we all do that.
Yeah.
Uh, And I think kids start reading hyperbole in our language by middle school. And so anyway, those were the big three: risk too little, rescue too quickly, rave too easily. That I think we do well to stop doing those.
I agree. You know, what's funny is just some quick context on this. Like when my two, so I have four boys. You know, I have two olders. We call them the bigs and the littles. We have
Okay.
17 and 16, and we have 10 and 8.
Okay.
And I remember, like, I always like came in, like, my father-in-law one day, like my oldest son, I think, was 2, and he went to like kind of fall, and I dramatically tried to catch him, and my father-in-law was like, the heck, man? Like, you like grab your kid like he's falling off a cliff. Like,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
falls on the floor, he'll be fine. Come on. And I'm
It's
like, that's a
so
good point.
true.
It is.
Yeah.
And you know, now with the uh with the littles, with the little ones we have, like, I'm just like, go figure it out, man. I don't
That's right.
know. Go figure it out. Tell me what you learned. Come back, right?
That's right. I
And
love it.
I do
Yeah.
too. And the other thing too is, you know, rave too easily. I'm a words of affirmation. That's one of my love languages. And my
Yeah.
grandfather, you know, he basically kind of was my father figure, and he was very good at compliments. But, you know, I've had so many experts on here, you know, that, you know, kids can smell an insincere compliment like way better than what we think that they can. So, like, when you're like, "Oh my gosh, you are phenomenal. I can't
Yeah.
believe how well you put the
Yeah.
fork in the
Yeah.
dishwasher."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And they're just like, "Yeah, thanks." Right? I mean, they might smile, but they also know that it's not sincere. But I also,
Disingenuous. Yeah.
it isn't. Like, I'm more of a fan, and luckily, because I've learned it through this podcast, of acknowledging hard work and characteristics. So, like, very rarely, like, you know, I can't remember who caught it, but like, maybe it was my brother-in-law or something like that. Like, my son, like, radically turned his wrestling season around here recently. Like, the last 4 weeks of wrestling, like, he had a hard time the first half of the season, and the last 4 weeks he was like almost went undefeated. Like, he just turned into a savage.
Yeah.
And he literally, I think his last 13 meets, he lost one. So he went 12-1 in his last
Wow.
12. And I was just like, and I just raved. I was like, I'm not surprised, you know, about
Yeah.
your wins. I
Yeah.
was like, because you've worked really hard. You've
Yeah.
worked on your takedowns, you've worked on your speed, you've worked on your conditioning, you've been eating right, you know, you've been doing your routine and making sure you're not in your head, you're in your body
Yep.
and that kind of
Yep.
thing. You're calm. And I can't remember who pointed out, they're like, dude, you didn't even really recognize the wins. I was like, of course not. I was like, because the wins are a result of everything he's doing. So I want to
Yes.
highlight that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So can I volley back?
Yeah.
You brilliantly applied Dr. Carol Dweck's work at
Yeah.
Stanford University. Love her. Remember mindset?
Mindset.
So
Yeah. That's where we got it from.
yeah, she teaches us when we affirm variables that are out of their control, we produce a fixed mindset. Either I'm beautiful or I'm not. Either I'm good or I'm not. If we praise variables that are in their control, like you just did, you put your time in, you worked hard, blah, 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 you create a growth mindset because that's repeatable. I can work hard again, for the next match meet. So anyway, I affirm what you did. And I think your son knows dad's proud of him by the way he talked about the work he put in. That's good.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. I love Carol Dweck's work because I used to compliment the other way. I used to compliment for results.
Ah,
Right. And I
so
haven't
true.
done that in probably 8 years, like I learned um, I learned that lesson early on. But let's talk about your family. So you've been married for, I mean, you're like a newlywed, 43 years. And what have you, what can you teach? I just celebrated 20 years, right? But we have a lot of guys who listen to this show who've been married for much less than 2 decades, and they're
Yeah,
just really
yeah.
trying to navigate this thing called marriage. But dude, I am so curious before we get to your amazing book, which, by the way, like I said, I've been reading to my kids. Um, what have you learned in 43 years of marriage that you can teach us, us newbies that keep making the same dumb mistakes that we probably shouldn't be?
Yeah. We pay dummy tax, don't we, all the time as dads and husbands. I don't know if there's one silver bullet, but in fact, I know there's not. However, I think the fact that Pam and I began one of those years of the 43 determining we're going to grow together couples often grow, but they grow apart sometimes. You grow on this, they grow on that way, and next thing you know, you're kind of roommates rather than
Yes.
in it together. So we're traveling together a bunch. I travel and speak quite a bit and write. And so she's with me in Cancun. She chose to go to Cancun with me. Imagine that.
Sounds
But
terrible.
I know she's no dummy. But I think growing together has been key. But I would say for me, I have had to learn to to uh, apologize, and be emotionally available to her. I'm kind of a let's get the job done, kind of an old school, kind of like my dad was. And I've had to learn to be available and to say, gosh, I did that wrong. And the sooner the better after the wrong is done. Those have really helped because I think Pam's always been able to do that. And I would stand behind that cue. Well, she's a female, of course they need to. But when I began to learn, no, about half the time, maybe more, I need to be the one leaning in and saying, I did that wrong. Can I have a do-over? And so I think that's what's really helped us in 43 years of marriage. Yeah.
So a little slice of humble pie
Yeah, that's right.
goes a long way. Yeah.
That's right. I'm getting fat on humble pie. That's what I need.
You and me both. No, I like that because a lot of people just want to defend, to defend their
Yeah.
ego,
Yep.
and even
Yep.
if they know that they're wrong, they just want to defend and be right. And
Yeah.
we have a saying that we use in our community quite a bit of, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? Right.
Yes.
And I think there is a time to be right. And there's actually a time to be both. You can be right and
Yep.
effective, but you can also be right and really, really insanely ineffective
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
communication, conflict resolution, and that kind of thing. So I
So true.
love
It's
that.
playing the long game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you think? I'm curious. You have two adult kids. You have a boy and you have a boy and a girl. I'm curious as to over the years, any type of feedback that your kids have given you watching you and Pam's relationship. What do you think some of the gems are that they've learned from you guys?
Well, they definitely have noticed something that probably you and I say all the time, that the greatest gift we can give our children is a good marriage between the two
Yes.
parents.
Yes.
They've talked about that they love how mom and dad love each other. And I still date my wife, and I'm gonna be speaking in Hawaii this week, which is
God,
not a bad gig.
Cancun and Hawaii, it's
Yeah, I
just
know.
brutal for you. I'm so sorry to
Would,
hear this.
would, would you like to join my team?
Yeah,
Uh,
actually, are you hiring? Because I could be your travel
well,
planner.
but this week happens to be, I know you're releasing this podcast later, but it's Valentine's week. So
Right.
we're going to have an incredible celebration of Valentine's Day, 43 years into the gig. And then I'll speak the next couple of days, but it's going to be really fun. So that would be one. But the way I describe my children is Bethany is a piece of work and Jonathan's a work of peace. So their temperaments are very, very different. She's kind of, wow. In fact, if you said to her when she was 10 or 11, the sky is blue, she'd say, no, it isn't. It's aqua. She's always countering with something different. Jonathan was so congenial. So you got to parent them differently, just like you got to lead people differently at work based on who they are. So, Larry, at Growing Leaders, I teach leadership with images. I think it's the best way to remember stuff. So,
Really?
this principle for
Yeah.
parenting is chess and checkers. Chess and
Hmm.
checkers. Those two games are played on the very same game board, right? But they're very different games. In checkers, all your pieces move alike, they all look alike. So you treat them all alike. In chess, if you have any hope of winning the game, you got to know what the bishop does this, and the knight, and the rook, and the pawn, and the king. Only in knowing the strength of each piece can you win. I think in parenting, the worst advice I could give a listener right now is to play checkers with your kids. That all the discipline looks alike, all the words look alike. You got to play chess and figure out you got a bishop in front of you or a queen in front of you, and you got to lead based on who they are. But it's work. It's harder work to play chess than checkers, so we don't do it. So that was my key with my own kiddos as they were growing up is I better find out, I better read them before I lead them. That was my key, I think.
I love that, man. I've wrote that down. What chess and checkers has to do with raising our kids because yeah, they're all different. I mean, you have two, I have four. I have to go about all four of them totally different. Like
Yeah.
even my older two, you know, that were raised like only 18 months apart,
Yeah.
they couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
Right. So like even like if I want to have quality connected time with each one of them, right? And I'll share this example because neither one is neither better nor worse. It just is, right?
Yeah.
My oldest son is like an open book. All you have to do is sit down, ask him one question, and just let him carry the conversation for the
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
45 minutes, right? My 16-year-old is more good, fine, busy, crazy, boring, right? Those are the answers I get. So
Yeah.
in order to open him up, it sounds kind of crazy, but in order to open him up, we have to do an activity first. So
Mm,
something like that connects us, whether it's like, you know, we'll go to the firing range, we'll go bowling, we'll throw the football, something that connects us first, because otherwise
yep.
he's hard to crack, right?
Yeah.
He's not the kid that I'm going to take to Starbucks and be like, let's have a conversation because he'll shut
Yes.
down. You know, he
Let's
just
chat. Yeah.
right, let's have a chat. But if we do something side by side, I can't get him to shut up, which I love, right?
Yes.
And then my
Yeah.
two younger ones, they're totally different as well. Like I have to approach them even quite a bit differently. But yeah, I love that because I think we try to, as parents, we try to parent all of our kids the same. But what we forget is these are one, two, three, four, five, how many every kid you have, totally unique human beings. They might have come from the same two people, but they
Yeah.
ain't the same.
Nope.
Yeah.
That's so true. You're spot on.
Yeah. This is awesome, man. So let's do this before we move into your book. It's not very often that I get to ask this question of a man who's raised adult kids, right? A lot of my guests, they have kids who are younger. So, you know, what I'm so curious is, what did you and Pam do? It's really a two-part question for each
Okay.
kid. What did you and Pam do to cultivate a really good connection
Mm,
with your son and your daughter? I would say separately and individually, right? How did you guys cultivate this connection with each one of them? And then how have you guys gone about, because they're obviously successful human beings, right? How did you
mhm.
guys go about raising someone, you know, these kids, a boy and a girl with confidence, with character, right? All these
Mm,
things that are so important, because I'm sure
yeah.
just even based on genders, right? You had to go about it a
Yeah.
little differently.
Very differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably, well, first of all, we did do the kinds of things you just described. At least we tried to. We try. I mean, I had daddy-daughter dates and daddy-son dates, and Jonathan wanted to go to Taco Bell and get a burrito, so we did that. Bethany wanted to go to some very fine establishment, of course, to, have this chat. But Larry, probably the best parenting decision we made with each of the two kids was when they turned 12 and 13, that 12, 13 year, which is very often the rite of passage year in cultures around the world, and even in the Jewish culture of yesteryear, the bar mitzvah, the bat mitzvah, that type of thing. So let me tell you what we did with Bethany. I'll do it succinctly, but I think it can be applied to boys and girls. When Bethany turned, it was just after her 12th birthday. We sat down at the dinner table about 9 o'clock at night, and I said, Bethany, Mom and I want to, with you this year, create a rite of passage year. She said, What's that? And I explained it. And that night, together, we chose 6 women that would be one day mentors for her that next year. Women that she thought were really cool, as an eighth grader, or seventh grader, and women that Mom and I both agreed were really wonderful role models, working women, stay-at-home moms, but we want one to find well-adjusted, sharp, healthy ladies to be a model for her in addition to us, not instead of us. Well, Larry, I tell you, this year was so pivotal for Bethany. I'll just tell a couple of stories. So that night, we chose 6 women that would be these mentors. I called them all up the next day and I said, I got a zany idea. Would you, in the next 365 days, be willing to pick a day and spend the day with our daughter, or rather, her spend the day with you? If you go to work, take her to work, put her to work. If you want to. If you stay at home, keep her at home. But we just want her to be with you to watch you live your life that day. And the only thing I would ask is, in the course of that day, would you share one life message with our daughter Bethany? A message you wish you would have heard when you were 12 or 13, but nobody ever shared it with you. Well, every one of these ladies not only said yes, they went beyond my wildest imaginations. Sarah was the very first one in the queue that year. She's an RN. She worked at the local hospital in the maternity ward. She took our little girl, Bethany, into the maternity ward.
My
Bethany was helping
gosh.
women give birth to babies for between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. that
What?
day. I'm not kidding. Yeah,
Oh my
they treated her
gosh.
like an intern. Scalpel, scissors. So Bethany's watching everything. I'll just stop there, watching everything that day. At 3 o'clock, she's had this experience. Sarah took Bethany out of the maternity ward and into another room in the hospital where she taught a class for unwed mothers, girls that were teenagers and were pregnant and probably didn't want to be. Bethany sat through that very sobering experience. And then, do you know what Sarah's life message was for our daughter at dinner time that night?
Dying
Now,
to
think of
know.
the experience she just had. It was on handling your sexuality wisely. Well, don't you know that message got through loud and clear that particular day, much better than my lecture on the subject. And I got a good lecture, I'm telling you. But I mean, Betsy was a flight attendant with Delta. She flew Bethany up to New York City for the day on a buddy pass. Talked about how you can make your life a life of adventure and not predictability. Holly took Bethany to the projects downtown Atlanta, and they served the underprivileged and the homeless all day long. Every one of these ladies they were experiential, and there was a lesson in it. Well, at the end of the year, Larry, I know I'm going long here, but this
No,
hopefully
keep it going, man. This is good.
at the end of the year, we had all 6 of these ladies over to the house. Bethany served them dinner, which was a big deal for her. And then after dinner, we went into the family room. And now I had coached Bethany, but I didn't do it for her. She did this. Bethany set up a chair in the middle of the family room. All the ladies sat around the sofa and chairs in a circle. And one by one, Bethany read them a personal thank you letter. Dear Miss Betsy, this is what I learned from you. This is how my life changed. Thank you. Dear Miss Holly, dear Miss Sandra, dear Miss, I'm telling you, there was not a dry eye in the room as she just read these notes and they were whispering back to her, Bethany, I believe in you, that sort of thing. Well, at the end of this experience, we're all grabbing Kleenex. I stood up and tried to explain what a rite of passage experience is. I couldn't make it through my little presentation, but I didn't have to. Every one of these ladies was intuitive on what was going on. And they got up from the sofa and chairs and knelt down on the carpet around Bethany and looking up at our little girl, just started speaking words of blessing. Bethany, you're going to be a great leader, I can just tell. Bethany, you're going to be a great wife if you choose to be. Bethany, you're going to be a great mama if you choose to be. Well, I mean, talk about words of affirmation, Larry. She just bloomed in the following years of high school with those ladies' voices echoing in her head. It was just astounding. Now, I'll wrap it up this way. You ask about my son too. I won't go into. We did a similar thing with him, but here's the hilarious thing about Jonathan. Jonathan was 9 years old at the time this happened. So he's watching all of this going on that last night together. So when I tucked Jonathan into bed that night, I pulled up the covers and he looked at me and goes, Dad, I've already picked the 6 guys I want to mentor me.
No way. And he's
Yeah,
9?
he's already chosen these cool guys
Come
that he
on, man.
athletes and businessmen and pastors. And so anyway, I would just encourage listeners in your own way, could you create an experience where you invite voices along with yours? Yours is never going to be completely complete. Neither was ours.
Mhm.
But boy, to ask others in the community to be that village that echoes your values that you have.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it was priceless for both of my kids.
I love that, man. I literally was just on a podcast this past weekend with a guest. Um, and we were talking about this very thing. And I can't remember what the question was from the host of the podcast, but he was just like, hey, what do you think is one of the biggest things that's missing with raising, and we were talking about boys because I have all boys.
Yeah.
And I said something and he just kind of like looked at me puzzled for a minute. He's got a 2-year-old daughter, so he's kind of like not there yet. And he's like,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm a huge fan of bringing in other like-minded men to pour
Yeah.
into my kids. And he's like, what do you mean by that? I was like, well, I've taken both my older boys on a rite of passage. Right.
Yeah.
And one of them was a bit crazy. I took my oldest on the Squire, which is hosted by Bedros Koulian, which is more of a crucible. It's like a 15-hour, like, you're doing some hard things, right? But
Yeah.
it's not anything to like destroy you, but you're doing this with your son, and it's run by Navy SEALs, and I mean, some of it they're in your face a little bit and that kind of thing, but it's also every evolution that you go through, the hard things, right? They bring it back to a teaching moment in a very
Yeah.
calm way, right? So like one of the things was being in an ice bath for 2 rounds of 3 minutes, and you're just sitting there face to face with your son in this ice bath, right? And you're just talking to each other, keeping each other calm. There's also evolutions where we had to do hard things but communicate well, right?
Yep.
And the cool thing about that is that, that was 3 years ago.
Mm.
And even now, when I talk to my son, and I'm like, hey, what would what would Coach Ray say about that? Who's a Navy SEAL, right? What would Coach Ray say about what you're thinking? And he's like, oh, he would say this, this, and this. I'm like, well, you know. And the other thing too, like I took my 16-year-old on a rite of passage as well, but like the same podcast I was on, this man also owns a gym, and he works with my son who plays football, agility, and he's doing off-season training and all that. And you can go get agility and off-season training anywhere, but I specifically wanted this guy
Yeah.
because he's very like-minded, he's very growth mindset. He pours words into you as you're not just doing training, but it's like the
Yeah.
training up here, right? And so I told this guy, I said, I specifically encouraged my son. I was like, hey, I think we should go to Bart, right? I think Bart would be the guy for this. I think not only is he going to teach you, but it'll be a good thing for you. So like, I know we chose him in particular because he's constantly, pouring words of just wisdom and encouragement, and having him not only be physically ready but mentally ready, not just for football but for life. And I think that's so important to find other like-minded people like you and Pam did for your
Yeah.
son and daughter, because those lessons, I mean, what you just described, that's a core memory. You're going to be 80 years old and still remember
It's
that,
true.
right?
It's true.
It's Yeah, so good on you for that, man. I love that. Very cool stuff. This is gold so far, man. So let's move on to your book, which, by the way, I've experienced this book myself. And I love it. It's I Can't Wait. And you sent me this book. I mean, this was launched back in November, but you sent me this book, and I've been reading this with my kids. And the very first story that I shared, so it's 52 stories of kids basically doing amazing things that go above and beyond. And what I can tell you is these stories, they're short yet so powerful, and they're engaging. Like for me who's reading them, but like I think, was it Virgil the hurricane, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So like this kid, like, what, 17 people he saved, right?
Yeah. He was
Yeah,
13 years old. Saved
13 years
17
old.
people during Hurricane Harvey. Yeah.
Yeah. And my kids were just like blown away by this. And here's the cool thing that comes out of this book. And then I'll shut up, and I want you to share with us, what this book is about, why you wrote it. The conversations and the questions that come
Yeah.
out of these really short stories that probably don't last more than 5 to 7 minutes are
Yep.
very different than, red sock, blue sock, green
Yeah.
sock,
Yeah.
or whatever. Just a
Yeah.
Dr. Seuss or whatever. But I'd love for you to share what was the premise behind writing this book.
Yeah. Well, I think that probably the first premise or foundation was that I interface with so many families today. We partner with schools and we meet families that we're not having good dinner time conversations together. It's in fact, first and foremost, they're not having a lot of meals together because we're, in the minivan getting chicken nuggets, running from soccer practice to karate. And we just don't have time for conversation. And secondly, we're often not good at conversation. Oftentimes it's, how was school today? Fine. What'd you learn? Nothing. That was it. So this was designed to launch short conversations, meaningful conversations at mealtime, drive time, bedtime, or get ready in the morning time. The natural junctions of your day, where you read about Virgil or Anne or Louis or whoever, and they are great stories. I've been curating these stories, Larry, for at least 20 years. just saving them up, saving them up. And I thought, this is one a week for a year now. And so I want to help families have better conversations together at one of those junctions, mealtime, bedtime. And then I want to inspire kids to not just veg passively in a video game or on TikTok, but to get up off their bottom and do something. So that's my intent.
Well, you've done a really, really fantastic job of it because these stories are so unique and they encourage so much conversation, right? And I love the fact that we're doing these once a week, and I love the fact that we're talking about doing these in at junction points, right? I always think about doing this stuff before bed, but I'm sitting here, even as you talk about these things, I'm like, man, what a really cool dinner conversation. And it
Yeah,
only takes a handful of minutes to actually read the story, that you wrote, and
yeah,
then it's off to like good conversation around it, right?
right. That's
And
the goal.
it's really cool too. Now that I'm thinking about it, for guys out there that have kids that are both young and older, right? Like I could actually see my older ones like adding some flavor or questions to the story so my
Yeah,
little ones can hear it, right? Or even like
yes,
just to pour into their own lives. That's really cool.
yeah. In fact, if I were you, I'd actually enlist them and say, hey, you'll benefit from this, but more than that, help me pour into your younger siblings, blah, blah, blah. I think that would be a great challenge for those teens that you got in your house. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. What kind of feedback have you gotten from this book other than just feedback I've given you? Like what are people saying about the book?
Yeah. Well, it's been so much fun because a lot of the people using it are teachers that might take, one time a week on Friday to do one of the stories in history class or social studies or whatever. Um, one of the stories has gotten, actually, there's a few, but one of the stories that's gotten the best feedback is Louis. So, the stories are from kids today, but also yesteryear. So, Louis, I don't know if you got to that one yet, but Louis lived
Not
back in the
yet.
19th century. He's from France and grew up, yeah, in the 19th century. But when he was 3 years old, he was out in his dad's tool shed. I guess they had them back then too. And he got one of those sharp awls. Remember the awls that you could poke holes in leather and make a belt or whatever?
Yeah.
Got to hold one of those awls. And this 3-year-old kid, Louis, poked an eye out. And it was awful. But because medicine wasn't what it is today, the infection grew from one eye to the other, and he went completely blind within a year. So this little kid, 3 years old, now had no vision at all. Well, his mom and dad were engaged. They thought we got to get some good schooling for our blind kid. So they went to Paris. They were in France already and found a school for the blind. But the only system this school had for blind kids wasn't really good. It was actually a system designed to help people see in the dark, but not people that were completely blind. And so Louis joined the school as an elementary school kid. By the age of 12, he thought, I have got to create a new system. By the age of 15, Louis had created a raised dot system. His name is Louis Braille.
Braille. Oh my gosh. I was
Uh-huh.
like, why does this story sound so familiar?
Yeah. So at 15 years old, he's a kid that comes up with a system we now use worldwide. But here's the cool part of that. That's a cool part. There's another cool part. I put a little zinger at the end. The tool that Louis used to create this new system was an awl. The very tool that had blinded him and created tragedy, created triumph in the end. The stumbling block became the stepping stone. So it starts a conversation of what bad stuff have you had happen to your kids that maybe you could turn around and use it, leverage it, to create something good in the end. So anyway, those are just obviously great feedback because so many kids feel like they're victims of the pandemic or whatever, whatever. And I just feel like we need to say, how could we use this? How could we use this for good?
I love that, man. And you are using it for good. I really, really like it. As we wrap up here, what do you have? So if you look out at the next year, what exciting things do you have coming?
Wow. Well, I have always been about the next generation. That my nonprofit is called Growing Leaders, and we're all about developing the next generation of leaders who grow from the inside out, so they can turn the world upside down. I know that sounds cliche, but that's exactly what we're after. So I really see us impacting 1% of the youth population of the world to think and act like authentic leaders. Not a power trip. Servant leadership is what we're after, life-giving leadership. But that's my goal before I die, is we've impacted 1% of the kids around the world. And a book like I Can't Wait is a tool. These images that I talked about earlier, that's another tool. Images, well, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So we're hoping to spark just great conversations with coaches, teachers, parents with their kids to really turn loose a generation of kids that may be the most world-changing generation of kids we've ever seen in history. Yeah.
I love this, man. This has been such a fantastic interview. I just want to recap a few things with you. You know, Tim, you shared 3 mistakes that we
Yeah.
can easily make as parents, right? To rescue too quickly, to risk too little, and to rave too easily. Marriage, that humility and ownership is key. I love that, by the way.
Yeah.
Our kids have a front row seat to the marriage. I say that particular quote all the time, you know, especially for parents out there that are just like, oh, it's all about the kids. I'm like, well, we're kind of missing
Yeah.
some of the most beautiful lessons we could teach them as it relates to, you know, our relationship. But what chess and checkers has to do with raising our kids,
Yeah.
how to raise strong, how to raise a strong, confident young woman and man, like, and what you guys did with the 6 people in their lives, like, man, that is amazing. I just love that rite of passage. And then, you know, I love the fact that you've created this resource of I Can't Wait, you know, the 52 stories of incredible things that kids have done. Because it just shows, number one, it creates incredible conversations either around the dinner table or at bedtime or these junctions that you mentioned. But also, you know, reinstating that, hey, you're not too young, man, or not, you're not too old. Like you can do anything. You can do big things, right?
Right. Yep.
Love
So
that.
true. Well, I've so appreciated being with you, Larry. Thanks
Same.
for starting this conversation, and I'm hoping it was helpful and relevant to your listeners.
It sure was. I want to make sure that the men can find you and your book. So where's the best place for men to connect with you? Grab a copy of your book or do
Yeah.
whatever you need
Yeah.
them to do.
Okay. Well, the book can be best found at ican'twaitbook.com, ican'twaitbook.com. The reason I send them there, you can find it on Amazon, but on that site, you can not only get the book for about the same price, but also there's access to videos on all 52 of these kids. So you can watch a video on Virgil or watch a video on Louis or whatever. So that would be one. And then my website is timelmore.com. I can be reached there, and you can even reach out in an email if there's a question or comment too. So
Awesome, man. Well, that's super cool. You, you're taking this so many steps further than most people do with books. I'm sitting here thinking I've got a book that's launching here in June on Father's Day, and I'm sitting here thinking like, man, I need to up that book game a little bit, right? Or at least get the
that's right.
publishers to be like, hey, this guy's doing this. Maybe you guys should think about doing this for
Absolutely.
my book. So,
That's
well,
right.
guys, not to worry. We're gonna have all the links in the show notes for you. Head on over to thedadedge.com/465 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/465. We'll have I can't wait book.com in the show notes for you. Also, we'll have Tim's website, his social handles as well. And if you want to connect with him, have a conversation with him, DM him, I'm sure he's available. So, Tim, from my heart to yours, from our audience, from me, thank you so much for coming on today. This was awesome. I freaking loved every minute of it, man.
Well, I am honored to be with you, Larry. Thanks for what you do, and look forward to the next time we get to talk.
Same, my friend. Same.